Hey everybody, this is Evan with Let's Do This, and if you're watching this, you probably want to know how to skin, quarter, and butcher your venison. So let's get to it. This is kind of a long video, but it's in depth, and I'll show you all it takes to do it. My buddy shot this deer, and he gutted it already. Typically, people that are field dressing their own deer, sometimes you know how to do this already. Sometimes you just want some tips. Maybe you want to find out a cleaner way to do it. Otherwise, you want to save money not by not bringing it to the butcher, because nowadays the butchers charge 150 to 200 a deer. Back in the day when I was doing this full time, it would take me about 45 minutes to skin it and quarter it out and get it into steaks and chops and wrap it. Now that I'm kind of educating as I go, it takes a little bit longer. It took me about 2 hours start to finish. And, I was filming the whole thing, moving my camera around, showing my buddy how to do it because he's never done it all himself either. Ideally, you'd want this deer a lot higher. His garage was only so tall. So hang it up by the back legs. I have a nice sharp skinning knife. So this knife is made for this. You want to work your way around closest to the skin and the carcass and the fur as you can. You kind of want to just let your knife do the work so you don't cut it in any of the meat. So you kind of work your way around, Again, you just want to kind of be in between the fur and the meat. Once you get to the tail, you can pull it right off. I just cut through the bone. Notice I'm not really being too careful. He didn't want to keep this fur. He didn't want to tan it. So I'm not being too careful about worrying about caping it or anything here. Once you get to this point, you notice we can just pull it down. Now, if this deer were higher up, you could do this step in one go. You could just pull it all the way off. But since it's not that tall up into the ceiling, we have to kind of work it down, use our weight. And once it's not going down anymore, we have to kind of keep cutting till it just kind of falls away. Getting it up and around the shoulder joint, you can get it all in one piece, but I cut through the fur down into the skin and work it around the shoulder that way. Again, he didn't want to keep this, so I wasn't being too careful. If you keep the head and neck and everything intact, that's called caping a deer. If you want to mount your fur, you can see where he shot it right through the chest there. He said it dropped it in one shot, so that's a very good shot. You're not wasting a lot of meat. When I worked at the butcher shop, I've butchered hundreds of deer, so this isn't something that I'm just doing the first time. So might make it look a little too easy, but take your time. Doing it's not hard. And once we get all the meat out on the counter and start cutting it up, you're going to see step by step how easy it is. You got your steaks, your chops, your roasts, your jerky meat. Some people grind it all. Some people like it steaks and chops and roasts, and you still get a little bit of jerky meat and a lot of grinding. Usually you add some beef tallow, beef fat to your grind, but we'll get to all that. Once I get down to the neck, again, since it's not that high up into the garage, we have a little bit of a tough time getting it down around the neck. So I think, we cut it around. I cut through the neck. So I'm showing them kind of where we want to cut through when we do. Getting this shoulder blade, you just cut through. So there's no bone to cut. You're just cutting the shoulder blade away from the rib cage. There's no joint that attaches it. So once you get this meat cut, you don't want to go too deep because you don't want to go into your loins. That's where you get your chops from. And see, once you just cut through that, it just falls right away. So the shoulder blades are easy to get off of there. And now we're working it down around the neck. I'm just kind of running my knife all the way around in circles, working it down bit by bit. And then once we get to where the loins are run out, get far enough down the meat, then we can just go ahead and cut the head right off. Some people keep their neck intact and cut a big chunk of the neck out, and it's actually just called a neck roast. I've never cooked one myself. Some hunters that dropped them off at the meat shop, they want the whole neck for a roast. The ribs too. I've never tried the ribs off a deer myself. Some people say they're too much tallow in there. There's not enough meat. It's not worth it. But we give the hunters back whatever they want. And there you want to start just forward of the legs and just cut right through the spine. And then here I'm showing them where the back straps are. You go right to the side of the spine, cut all the way down to the ribs, turn your knife and follow that rib cage all the way down, and you're going to get your loin out in one big muscle there. So I'll be cutting that up into chops. Here we're cutting the head off, the skin, and now we just have the carcass. So there's our loins. And time to fuel up. There we go. So for the chops, you can do a butterfly chop. I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm taking off the silver seam first. Take off any hard tallow that's on there. So if it doesn't look like it's a buttery piece of fat, if it's more hard, that's tallow. You don't want that. You don't want to grind it. You don't want to eat it. It's not going to render down, so just throw it. You want your grind pail. You want your just garbage. And then you want your bin where you're going to put all your edible pieces of meat. So here I'm butterflying these chops, and you want to go from that silver seam point down. You don't want the loin flipped the other way. You want it so when you open it up, your silver seams around the edges. And so those were all butterflied. And towards the end here, you can choose what you do. Cut it into chops still, or you can just use it as jerky meat. You can leave it as a loin roast. It's pretty much up to you. That's the other nice thing about doing it yourself, is you can keep it in whatever cuts you like it. And doing this at home, again, it's going to save you 150, 200 bucks. Butchers, if you bring it into the shop, all cut up already, just bring them, 20 pounds of your ground stuff. They're a lot happier with that, and it's not going to cost you near as much as bringing a whole deer in there. If you don't want to process it yourself, you can even grind it, keep your hamburger at home, and then bring in everything else that you want made into summer sausage, snack sticks, bologna, brats. I've done it all, but here we go. And I have the hot water there in case there's some hair on the steaks. I can put it in the water, it gets all the hair off. But we did pretty good at cutting this up. It's not a lot of hair on here. Second loin, I think what I ended up doing is just cutting chops out of this one. I didn't butterfly them. Maybe I butterflied a few of them, but taking that seam off of there, it's almost like taking the, that off the ribs, that silver seam, that whatever you call it. I'm not thinking straight right now. So just cutting straight through on these ones, just leaving those into chops. I think they're a little easier to cook that way, but I'm showing you each way to do it. And then the end of the loin, I just cut those in the chops also. Leave them about an inch thick. So those are the loins. And now we're getting to just some flank here. That we'll just grind up. I'm cutting off the sinewy, fatty stuff, throwing that away. And that just one big piece of grind. He's cutting the antlers off there. So again, that had a little bit of hair on it, so I'm washing that off. And now we're cutting through the hindquarter. This is where most of your steaks are coming from. Front shoulder blades pretty much is grind. Here, get through the hip joint. So you got to find the ball of the hip, work your way around that, go around the sacrum, and that'll just fall away nice and easy. There we go. And I'll be showing you on the other side here what that looks like. But for the hind joint, cut off the leg right where you're skinning it down to the first knuckle. And then you can cut it off there because there's no meat down further than that. I'm finding the other ball. Gotta work the tip of the knife in there. There's a tendon that connects the ball to the hip joint. And once you get that inside that, it's a labrum. But once you get inside the labrum, cut that little tendon in there and it should just peel right away. There you go. And then you can get some good meat off that hip joint still, that sacrum. Little piece of loin left in there. You can make that into some steaks or you can just grind it. I think I cut it up. Nope, it's into the grind. He wanted as much grind as possible because he likes to make summer sausage and snack sticks and brats. There's just some good jerky pieces there. You want to make some jerky too. Now here we go. So you want to find that joint in there, that knee joint. cut straight down to the hip bone, turn your knife and cut all the way through, and then pull it up over that ball joint, and that's your roast. There you go. That's one big solid piece of meat. And then what you want to do is take that top piece off. You're going to grab it from the top, and all that's kind of junk. You want to cut that off. Slide your knife through, work your way around. Stay on the top of the main muscle there. And you just want to cut that chunk off the top. And then I'm going to clean that silver seam up off of there. And you can leave it whole, and that makes a nice roast. Otherwise, you can cut it across the grain into steaks. I think I'd end up just leaving it whole. He gave me one of those to bring home, and then I ended up cutting it thin into steaks. Makes great jerky too. That's where your jerky meat comes from if you want to do that. So then to get the other steaks out of here, you want to cut on each side of the bone, just as deep as the bone goes, and around that hip joint, down around both sides. And then you're going to stick your knife through right underneath the bone, and you're going to pull it out through, because you're just separating the bone right now. You want to get that bone up out of there. You're going to lift it up by the bone, and then you're going to cut down and through. So I'm working my way underneath and around the bone, and once I can grab onto that bone, lift it up, all that meat falls down, and then you'll know where to get to that knuckle, get to that knee joint, turn your knife and cut down, and all that is steak. And you're going to see once I open up the steak here, it's going to show you right where to cut. You're going to go right along the seam of those muscles where they connect. And it's going to open up into two parts, and those are all either jerky meat or steaks, because that's whole muscle meat. You're not going to get a lot of fat in there or anything else. So it makes real good jerky, because venison meat is very lean. So I'm trimming that up, and by the time I'm done, you're going to see this is just solid red meat. And he wanted that cut up into steaks, and then if he wants to cut it even smaller and ends up making jerky out of it later, that'll work. So I'm just showing you there how nice those steaks look. And when you're cooking venison, you don't want to cook it very long, because it's fresh as can be. You don't have to worry about cooking all the yucky stuff out of there, because you know where it's been. So the biggest thing that hunters do is they cook it too long, and it gets real tough, because there's not a lot of fat in there. You're not going to be getting a very tender piece of meat. So I just do like 2 minutes on a side in a pan full of butter. And here I'm cleaning up the other side. Again, I'm just cleaning the fat, the gristle off of there. Some of it gets thrown away. The parts with more meat get thrown into the grind bin. He ends up, I think this deer was probably 140 pounds. Once you cut all the meat off, you get like 70 pounds of meat, and probably half of that, 30 pounds is ground. So figure that when you're cutting your deer. A lot of people bring a 180, 160 pound deer into a meat shop. They think they're getting that much meat back, but it's about half of that is just bones and throwaway, and then half of that, a quarter of it's going to be your steaks, another quarter is going to be your ground. So you'll get about 150 pound deer, you'll get 60 pounds of meat back. Cutting that other foot off, hoof, and again, I'm going to show you again. So cut down, follow that bone out, up and around the joint. You got that. Once you grab that top part, cut that off. There's some meat in there that you can grind. Most of it's throwaway. Clean that up, and then that's a whole piece of meat there you can use as a roast, or chop it up against the grain, and it makes good steak. So down on each side, work yourself down and underneath that bone. Once you lift up, bone out, cut all the way through, and there's your steaks. Open it up, cut all the way through. You don't leave it intact. You just follow in between where the seams are. And then you have your steaks. Once you clean them up, then you just cut them against the grain. We'll keep them as thick as you want. Leave it as a roast. Cut it for jerky. Or again, like I said, some people just grind all the meat. So it makes some good steaks. Remember to like and subscribe if you're finding this video helpful. I have a few other videos showing how to break down a sirloin, how to break down a whole rump, how to break down chuck, a whole chuck roll. I've been a butcher for many years. It's not my full-time job anymore. My brother owns a meat shop, so I fill in every now and then. But I definitely know my way around some meat. I used to cut venison all the time after hours. Get paid doing it, so. Have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Do follow and subscribe. I like to do these kinds of videos. Maybe some words of inspiration. Any questions too, if you want any recipes, you want any ideas on what to make out of venison. I got a lot of tips. I can share recipes with you. I don't mind doing that. So here we got our whole steak there. And then we're just going to cut it up into chunks. And I'm leaving them kind of thin just in case you want to make jerky out of them. Or else you fry them up real fast. And a lot of this we brought inside afterwards and vacuum sealed it. Usually I'll white wrap it, but vacuum sealing works just as good also. Cleanup didn't take too long. I think that took about 10-15 minutes. Brought the carcass out back. And there we go. It's all done. There's the grind bin. And your steaks, chops, roasts, and all that good stuff. And then this is cleaning up the front shoulders with the shoulder blades. This is all trim. You're not going to get much for steaks out of this. So just clean it up as much as you can down to the bone. Leave the gristle behind, tendons, all that stuff. You don't want anything to do with that. My buddy's back to the carcass there, cleaning everything off the ribs that he can. I saw that he left a bunch of meat on that bone that he threw in the bucket, so I snuck it out and I'm cleaning it up a little bit more. I don't like the lot to go to waste. Sharp knives, those are very important. Make sure to sharpen your knives. It makes your job so much easier. And I've never used an actual skinning knife before in the years of doing this, so the fact that he had one, I got to use it, man, I've been missing out because that knife made that skinning pretty easy. I'm used to hanging up frozen deer in -10 degrees and cutting frozen skin away from a carcass. So having it in a warmish garage was a nice change of pace. So I'll leave you be. Watch the last few seconds of this in peace. And I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks for watching.